I'm going to invite you to take a breath with me because that's what this little clip is about. I want to talk about the different ways that we breathe because it has implications for us in our ability to regulate when we are working clinically with our clients. So I'm going to invite you to take a breath as I talk about breath. So, when we are starting to move into an experience of, let's say, anxiety or irritation or frustration, which is really about sympathetic arousal, our breathing pattern naturally changes. And what happens is that we end up having a longer inhalation than our exhalation. It's like this kind of breathing. Some people call it shock breathing, where the system holds. Some people also call it chest breathing. This breathing that I am exaggerating right now to get the point across is sympathetic aroused breathing. What's interesting to think about is that many of us naturally breathe this way because we have been conditioned through our lives to move into this kind of breathing because of our own ongoing activation of our sympathetic aroused fight or flight response, almost like we've patterned our breathing in this way. So many of us actually walk around the world with like low grade anxiety as a result. Now, there's also a different kind of breathing, which has to do with a more dorsal parasympathetic. And the dorsal parasympathetic is where we go the opposite, which is where your exhalation becomes longer than your inhalation. So in this case, it's a and even as I exaggerate this, you can almost feel and even see in my body this sort of collapse that begins to happen, this heaviness that starts to set in. So both of these that I just demonstrated and talked about, I talked about it at an extreme level. The reality is that we're moving through the world trying to maximize, manage, however you want to talk about it, your sympathetic breathing and your dorsal breathing. To wake up in the morning, you gotta quicken your breath a little bit to get out of bed. To be able to go to bed at night and fall asleep, you gotta slow your breathing down. So there's this natural rhythm that we are trying to approximate. But what often happens is we get stuck, right? We get stuck in sympathetically aroused breathing, or we get stuck in a more dorsal response. So how this translates clinically is this. When you're with your client and activation shows up in the room through the stories and their play, you're going to have a corresponding breathing pattern kick in. So if all of a sudden anxiety shows up in the room and you move into sympathetic breathing, one of the ways that you can work at regulating your system is to then do more dorsal breath and to elongate your exhalation. Or let's say that you're in a session and there's a bit more of a feeling of depression or fatigue or disconnection that's happening in the room, and this sort of energy is kicking in, and you're noticing that naturally you're going way into dorsal. Well, one of the ways that you can support your own regulation is to bring in more sympathetically aroused breathing, to bring more air in. So even just knowing and understanding that we have the ability to bring air in or elongate our exhalation is an amazing tool that we can bring in clinically to our work to help us stay connected to ourselves. And then the brilliant thing is, as we stay connected to ourselves, our clients naturally feel the shift in our breathing pattern. And it's actually quite often then that their breathing pattern starts to follow suit and copy our breathing pattern. So it's another way that we can also offer regulation to our clients in the midst of activation. So go practice your breathing, become curious, and see what you can do in your sessions about using your breath to regulate yourself.